Hello, this video is all about the Raijintek PAXX-S PCI riser adapter. What it does is it allows you to mount your GPU vertically in the case, which is probably why you're watching this video. This is one of the most expensive ones you can buy, but it's worth it because we'll see it's got a very unique set of characteristics that the other ones on the market do not have. But this isn't an unboxing video because that's already been done. This is a video about how good it is. So key features, first of all, are it's got a little support stand, little foot. That's good. Raijintek on their publicity materials have that showing because it rests at the bottom of the case because it's designed to fit their cases. It's got a tapered, so a narrowing mounting area. That's going to be crucially important for what we're going to be using this for. You've got a very high quality cable. That's a worry because when you're adding extra cabling to these things, there's obviously a suspicion that there's going to be a frame rate drop. And there is a slight frame rate drop, but it's well within margin of error and isn't going to be significant, maybe 1 or 2 frames. Provided you've got a decent quality cable, which this one obviously is. So that's quite important. In terms of cooling, another worry you might have, yes, your card will run a bit hotter. That's mainly because the effectiveness of the back plate, which although isn't necessarily connected to anything particularly, does offer some heat dissipation. I think the effectiveness of that is reduced when it's vertical. So your card will run slightly hotter. But if your card doesn't have fans on it because it's a water cooled one, then that doesn't matter, obviously. So this video really is it's fully comprehensive because if you only have a GPU, then you can choose any of these riser cards, these riser adapters, to mount your GPU vertically, and we'll discuss the competition in a minute. But if you have another card in there, so for example, well, the main one obviously is perhaps a wireless card, but wireless cards can be low profile, so maybe you can get it to fit without worrying about that. But what if you've got a sound card like an AE5, which is what I've got, because I do like a sound card, that isn't going to work with any of the other adapters. It only works with this one. So if you've got another card that you need to use, maybe a video capture card because you're a Twitch streamer, then you're going to need this particular one above all the others, and this video will show you how to get things to work and how to get things to fit in a standard case. So without further ado, what we'll do is we'll look at the publicity shot for this one and then discuss the competition. So here we go. So for comparison purposes, here's the publicity shot for the PAXX-S, and we'll look at the competition. So the first one we look at is the cable mod. You'll notice this one has some cables with it. This particular one is the HDMI DisplayPort variant. You can get ones that have got 2 DisplayPorts, and I think there's one with 2 HDMI. But this one shows both. They're right-angled cables that come bundled with it, because when you put the riser in, the graphics card is inside the case, and so the display cable needs to poke out through the back. And a lot of cases, most cases in fact, have separators between the PCI expansion slots at the back. So because the display port is a pretty thick, substantial cable, because it's shielded, that can be quite rigid and it might not line up very happily with the holes. So this takes care of that by having right-angled connectors that then poke out the back. So that's quite handy. That's £55 for that one. There's no support for it, you'll notice. It hasn't got a little foot like the Raijintek one has. It's 7 slots, yeah. Next one is the Cooler Master. This is £45. This is completely flush with the back wall of the case. So I'm guessing, I haven't had a Cooler Master case for a long time, but I'm guessing they have removable panel at the back which contains the separators, or it doesn't have separators at all, which probably unlikely. So there's probably a removable panel. Or if you want to fit this, because this is £45, so it's £10 cheaper than the other one, you have to get your Dremel out and cut the little separators off. There is actually a nice little back plate on it, which will shield the cable, but apart from that, it's another 7-slot one. This is the Phanteks. This is £40. This is the cheapest of the bunch. This is a similar principle to the last one in that it's completely flush with the back wall of the case, so the screws to fasten the graphics card are outside the case. This is, it's got 5 little dots on it, well, little ridges on it, but it's actually a 7-slot one. They're all 7-slot really, but it gets interesting with the Raijintek one, as we'll see. So yeah, that essentially is the competition. You'll notice that this one has, I mentioned it a few times, you've got the tapered connector where it mounts. That is important, and that actually justifies the 83 quid that this costs. Plus the PCI Express extension cable is a high quality shielded one. You can see the cables are all separated and they're all well insulated. So in terms of frame rate drops, it's negligible. I think it's pretty negligible anyway, unless you buy a really cheap extension cable. I like it because this has got a foot. Case in point really is why it's called the PAXX when actually it says PAXX-S on the box. That's because of this one, which is the PAXX-D, which Raijintek aren't going to manufacture because they don't think there's sufficient demand for them. But that's why you've got the PAXX-S. This is obviously dual card, so you've got 2 PCI slots, 2 PCI extension cables. And what's interesting about this, what inspired this video really, is this bit of it, where you have a bracket that pushes out so that there's enough room to fit 2 cards in. That's important, as we'll see in the next part of this video. So let's talk problems, because now will be a good time to do that. The competitors to the Raijintek PAXX are pretty much all 7 slots. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So there's 7 slots in this case. This is a Corsair 450D case, and quite a lot of cases of this size do have 7 expansion bays. It's the sort of the nice tower ones that tend to have 8 or 9 as they go a bit further down to accommodate the very large motherboards. But a standard ATX case will have 7 slots. So if you put one of these vertical risers in, that's all your slots used up, because it covers them all if you use one of the competitors to the Raijintek. And what you might notice in this one is that there's a Sound Blaster AE5 installed, which is a sound card. So if you have a sound card, you can't use one of these vertical mounts because they don't fit. Except with the Raijintek, you've got the tapered mount. So actually, it kind of does fit. And we'll look at that in the next bit. But this might pose a few problems, because you might think, well, why don't I just use the top PCI Express slot for the sound card? Well, that is an issue, because although the GPU vertical risers occupy 7 slots, the actual top of the graphics card will normally poke out the top anyway, because you can see on this there's a good inch there above where it's actually screwed in. So the card is actually quite tall. This might pose a problem later, so let's see how we get on. So the graphics card's out, and what we see here is that actually with the Raijintek PAXX adapter we can fit the vertical riser in, because it's got that tapered narrowing bit where it fits on, it fits in quite nicely. So that's all good so far. I think that could go with being a little bit higher, and that just sits quite nicely on the power supply, which is pretty good. I think I might be able to go a little bit higher, just to give it that extra support. I haven't tightened it up, but you can see that's nice and flat there, and that tapered bit is quite nice. We'll see how we get on with the cables in a bit, and we'll see whether this RAM gets in the way, because that's the next thing. So let's put the card in and see what happens. Well, it didn't take very long. Basically, it doesn't fit because I mean, it's a massive card. This is a Zotac GTX 1080 Ti. It's the AMP edition, so this is a pretty sizable graphics card. If I try and bring it in, the problem we get is that it clears the CPU cooler just. It clears the RAM just, because they're almost at the same height, but it doesn't clear the power cable. Now I could bend that, but because the back of this gets warm, everything's a little bit too close to the things that I don't want to get hot. As far as the cage at the front, if I bring that down, it's going to be okay for the hard drive cage there, but I'm going to move that anyway. So I think we need to have a little solution to this problem, and I will just go and get that over here. I'll just take the mic off, drop that down there. I'll pop the mic on now, and I'll show you the solution. Da, da, da. It's an aluminium, rectangular aluminium tube. The idea is I'm going to cut a bit the right length of that, shove in 4 holes, and then put that behind that to bring this whole thing out. And there's a few bits that you need for that, which we'll just go over now. You will need a length, this is 1/2 meter, that's the smallest they did, 1/2 meter of aluminium rectangular tubing. This is 2.5 centimeters wide, and that's about 1 centimeter there. That's exactly the same width as the space you get, as we'll see. That was about £3, but they charged £12 for postage, so it came to about £15–16 in total. You will also need some long screws. Now the important thing here is that there's 632. That describes the thread, because that's the same thread that the back of the case uses. These come in packets of 16, and they're about £2 or £3, something like that. These are 3 millimeters, so 3 centimeters long. You can get slightly longer ones, but these are by far the most common, so I'm kind of hoping that these are going to work, because they're cheap and you've got a lot of choice when you buy them. They're obviously meant to attach certain radiators that use that particular thread, who shall remain nameless. So the idea is to make a little extension thing that fits on. So you can see from that there's actually I've got quite a bit of gap there. So if I get the riser thing in, it's going to be a bit awkward, because obviously I haven't put any screws in it yet, and put that like that. Even with the thickness of the riser, can you see, look at my thumb so you can see that I've got a good couple of millimeters to actually do the screw-ins in. So with a bit of luck, this should solve the problem. So first thing I need to do is to cut myself a length of tube that matches that. So we'll just go and do that now. So we're back, and it's a bit of a jump because it's all done. The reason for that is, well, I'll tell you the reason for that in a moment. There it is inside of the case, looking rather nice. the case is horribly reflected, so I'm going to take it off, side panel off. And if we look, we can see there's now plenty of room between the RAM and the back of the graphics card, and of course plenty of room between the RAM and the back of the graphics card and the all-in-one pump and the back of the graphics card. In fact, there's plenty of room between everything and the back of the graphics card. So that's actually maybe that's one reason I'm doing this anyway, so you get better thermals. While we're here, you notice that you can see the cables, and I don't know if you can see them actually. Can you see them? Probably not. But that's the first step of putting this in. So this bit of the video is actually about what order you do things, because that's quite important, as I discovered. So the first thing to do is get the actual mount, hold it close to the motherboard, roughly in the position where it's going to go, which is at the top screw hole there, and then see where the cables are going to lie, and just sort of bend them a little bit to help with that. So bend them into shape a little bit, so that when you're putting the card in, you haven't got the resistance and the cables are going to go pretty much where you expect them to go. So pre-bend the cables a little bit to help when it goes in. Next thing to do is, this is after you've taken all the back plates off and their screws obviously, and taken the graphics card out, is take the graphics card and fit it onto the bracket. So you slide it into the slot, screw it in at the top, and it's in the bracket. Next thing I did was I put the PCI Express connectors in for the power, because on this case there's not a lot of room between the optical drive bay and the top of the graphics card. So PCI Express connectors next. Then I got the DisplayPort cable, because it's quite thick, because it's shielded, and I poked that through the back of the case. Now I actually poked that through the middle because that's more flexible, and then poked it all the way through to sort of here, and then I plugged it into the graphics card. And then I lifted the whole lot up and put it into place. And what I noticed, and you can probably see, is that on this particular case, Corsair 450D, there's not a lot of room, but I was quite lucky in that the PCI Express port on the graphics card lines up rather nicely with the cable. Now I'll try and find a torch just quickly so that, to help with that. So does that help? Okay, you can see it's right on the edge. It's not under tension particularly, but it is it's about as close as it can be without it being a problem. So I was quite lucky there. And then once you've got the actual card in place, then you start putting the screws in. And the easiest thing to do is to put the top one in first, line everything up and screw it in partially, and then do the bottom one, put it in till you find the hole with your fingers, and then screw it in. Put it in, find the hole with your fingers, get your screwdriver, screw it in. And I put all four in, and there, and it's working nicely. There's plenty of room under the bottom as well because of the foot supporting the whole thing, so we like the foot, and it's worked a treat. So generally speaking, this is the only I mean, there are plenty of vertical mounts available. They're discussed in the first part of this video, but this is the only one that will allow you to use a decent size PCI Express card with it, because there's the AE5 and there's the graphics card. All the other ones occupy pretty much all the slots, and the way they fit in, because they haven't got this tapered mount, is that they start there. So you cannot use that extra slot. You might get lucky if you've got a wireless card, for example, that's low profile, and you might be able to use the top PCI slot for that, but that's just luck. This doesn't involve luck. If you want to use any card in the bottom PCI Express slot of your computer, then you can with this particular mount, and that's the reason I bought this mount. So what I'll do now is I'll take it out and we'll have a look at the bit of metal, and then we'll finish off. Obviously, if you've got any questions, now would be a good time to put them in the comments. I'm happy to answer them. So I'll stop recording this section and we'll go on to the next bit. And here we are again. So this is the last bit detailing exactly the details of the bracket. You don't have to watch this bit if you're happy with what's going on.
getting the aluminium, getting the screws. This is more of a summary really. So you've got the aluminium bar, and you've got 30mm fan screws. They're much more common. You can get ones that are longer, but they're very rare, and you've got a bit of a limited choice, whereas these you can get for less than £5, including delivery. So these are the ones to go for, and I was hoping that they would work, and they did. So great. So the actual bit of aluminium you need is just over 8 centimetres long, 8.5 centimetres. Now, because aluminium is a soft metal, remember, it's the shape that makes it strong. You can just use a hacksaw. Don't use a Dremel because it doesn't really work very well. But you can use a hacksaw to do it, to cut a bit length off. And then the screws are, and you can see I've drawn a line roughly to sort of see where the distance and the screws are on the case. They are, well, it's probably better to do it that way, isn't it? So if we start at 0, hopefully you can see where they are there. So it's about, the centre of the screw is about just over 5 millimeters. And, well, you can see, can't you? And it doesn't, notice these are all higgledy-piggledy as well. They're not exactly beautiful. The holes are quite big. It's the fact that that end is quite close that's important, because the top screw normally is quite close to the case. So that's the way it goes in. That's the back of the case. That's the way it goes in. 1, 2, 3, 4 screws, and the thing fits across like that. I measured it using this, so you can see from this that it's exactly the same length as that. And what I did then, this is another sneaky trick you can do, is you can do the screw holes about where they are on there. Just use the top, the highest point, but that's not quite where the screw holes necessarily are on your case. So you can do big screw holes in there, and it doesn't really matter because the screw head won't go through that. And then you find the hole with your fingers, screw it in once it's all in. That's the easiest way to do it. So that's all you need. It's not particularly beautiful. I might spray this one black, I haven't decided. But that's what you need, and then you can use your second PCI slot. So any questions, any comments, just put them in the comments. That was a dog shaking his collar. I think he wants to go for a walk. If you thought this was useful, then like and subscribe. And once again, thanks for watching.